Hey there, folks. This is Bradley Foster back with the Horseshoe Theory. I am here with my co-host.
Hi, y'all. This is AJ Albaaj. Glad to be talking to everyone again.
Right on. We're just gonna jump right into it because, man, we were gonna try and be funny about this episode, but we decided that the debate was enough of a comedy in and of itself. So, I don't even want to call it the debate because debate implies that there's some type of like preparation and, you know, something professional going on and there was norms and rules followed and that we gained insight into the candidates. But that's not what happened. So you just kind of want to talk about that gas sniffing of the American consciousness that was the debate last night, AJ?
Sure. So my memory is a little hazy because I went into the debate. I was thinking to myself, man, this is going to be a lot of fun. I've got some drinking games planned out. I'm ready for when Joe Biden says corn pop to take a shot. You know what I mean? When he says, "Look here," I had all of that stuff ready. I was waiting for Trump to say China to take a drink, China, China, and call it the woo. I had on my bingo sheet him calling it the Kung Flu. I thought that would happen, but none of that happened, and instead I lost track of the drinking game and I just drowned my sorrows in alcohol. So my memory between me going, what the hell is going on, and drinking is I had to piece it back together. But luckily, the media didn't do a good job. But once I started reading the news pieces, then I was like, oh yeah, I remember that stuff happening.
Yeah, it was definitely the one thing that I noticed about it, no matter like what article you read, it's almost like depending on if it's right wing or left wing, it's almost like just the same article with names switched out. You know what I mean? Like a really bad like plagiarism job from a seventh grader is almost what it feels like. Because neither
So
candidate was particularly poised, I felt. Neither candidate was particularly, in my opinion, Trump was the worst offender, but neither candidate was particularly good about staying on subject. Oof. Big oofta.
if we're discussing from a pure interruptions perspective, right? Obviously, Trump was the worst offender. Chris Wallace said as much during the debate that Trump was not letting him speak. Chris Wallace. So we're recording this. Today is Thursday, October 1st, and Chris Wallace even said today on Fox News that he went into the debate prepared to have a good debate that happened, and he placed the blame solely on the president. So, of course, the conservative websites are going to view things differently, and they're going to highlight other things like Joe Biden saying he is the Democratic Party and different types of things like that. But, that's kind of the nature of the debate. Everybody's going to walk away with different highlights. But I think from an objective perspective, we all need to come to the reality and quit both sidesing it that the issue of the debate was the president, Donald Trump. And I hope do you agree with me on that, Bradley?
I agree with you. I think that you're like mostly there, but at the same time, I really do think that it might have even been, how do you say? I think that Biden realized what was going on. And I think that I don't want to say that he necessarily played off of it, but I guess maybe it was just kind of a matter of once Trump went there, so did Biden. But it was a really the thing that really struck me about the debates, insofar as we can call it that, was that I I didn't really hear any ideation. I didn't hear anything that said, "Here's how we get out of this." I just kind of heard the other guy sucks worse than me, which is how it's been for a while now, but there's at least been some homage to a plan. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with that take. And I do think that this had the least substance of any debate ever. But I don't really I don't really blame Biden for the way he behaved because I tried to put myself in his shoes, and I'm sure he prepared some easy 2-minute bits where he could go off and try to form a couple coherent sentences on his plans or on his vision. But in general, I think there were only like 3 or 4 answers where Biden actually got an opportunity to do that. And you and I were both in debate. And did you ever do like congressional debate or a Lincoln Douglas debate, Bradley?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
frequently.
right. So I can just imagine myself going out on a debate and being constantly interrupted and messing with my train of thoughts and stuff. And I'm obviously Joe Biden didn't handle himself very well. He called him a clown, called him the worst president ever, which that one, that's probably something he rehearsed. The clown thing, probably not. But
Mm-hmm.
I can only imagine getting flustered when Biden already has a stutter, and he's not well known for being the best debate performer as it is, especially with that stutter. And so I imagine that his he just got more and more frustrated. But he hit it well. I got to tell you, there is one clear winner in this debate, and that is Biden's smile. That smile he has every time Trump would say something, and he's like, "Come on, man," and he's got that big smile. It's like a bulletproof vest. Just any sort of bullet Trump was throwing at him, Biden looked composed, just like smiling and laughing it off, which definitely set Trump off more because if we compare it to 2016, right, Hillary Clinton got very flustered with the way
Oh,
that the
she wasn't ready.
right, and that's also her as a person. She was never as charismatic as Joe Biden, but the differences could not be more stark with this debate. In that, obviously, Biden is not as much of a policy person as Clinton, but on pure charisma, right? He can just smile away a lot of those blows and kind of avoid the hits that Trump, at least according to the polling, that Trump took from the debate.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if those polling numbers roll out. I want to agree with you on a couple things and disagree with you on one thing. The one thing I'm really going to disagree with you on is I think that Biden had that clown in his back pocket from day one of this campaign. I can totally see him walking into the office or whatever he does at 8:45 a.m. and that being the first thing he hits him with. So I think Biden was prepping that one. That's the most Biden attack ever, and I love it. Secondly, I think that really the lesson from 2016, right, is that whatever the hell Trump represents, and I don't even know if he knows what he represents. I just think that he just kind of, I think that if anyone knows what's going on, it sure as hell isn't Trump. I think that he's just kind of, I would use the phrase talking out of his ass, but talking out of your ass implies that there's some level of attempt to come up with a formative answer. So I think I think that the Democratic Party as a whole is learning that Trump's not that serious, but you have to treat him with this. You can't just directly call him out on that. I feel like that's what Hillary did in 2016. And furthermore, my God, uh, I think it's really stark because I wouldn't use because when you think of Biden, especially in the modern electorate, he is already a throwback. And for this 83-year-old man or whatever he is to be so much more charismatic than Hillary Clinton, it uh it really kind of draws me to like what kind of institutional power do these absolute morons at every level hold, Because here's the deal. Literally the only person that the Democrats could have put out in 2016 that would have lost to Trump, I maintain was Hillary. And I do think that Biden's going to win in 2020, but man, I'm so confused about who is really really slamming the table for Biden. You know what I mean? I'm so confused as to how the Democrats back their way into a position where they go from automatically clearly being the more rational choice to being and granted Trump has really thrown off any attempt at rationality the last 2 or 3 months as the corona's gotten worse and plus his open he's putting down the dog whistle for more of a open yell at this point. He literally did that in the debates. I thought that was absolutely terrifying. But I think it's interesting how the Democratic Party and the DNC at large, I would say they're resting on their laurels, but the modern DNC doesn't have any laurels to rest on. So it's a very bewildering thing that's happened there. You know what I mean? How disconnected the party machine has become from the electorate as a whole.
So I agree that the DNC machine has become separate from at least what we interpret to be people's enthusiasm. But the Biden campaign, they're continuing to reach out to, you know, what is the actual average voter. Unfortunately, neither you or me are the average voter, but the average voter is someone that's like 50 years old, right?
That
So,
is true.
uh, so Biden naturally appears to that part of the electorate, and some campaign coordination, potentially some strategic decisions by his opponents also boosted him based on that South Carolina primary. But that's all neither here nor there. In terms of what Biden was doing in the debate, it is absolutely a throwback. It was in the Democratic primaries, right, where he talked about kids gathering around the radio and listening to the radio at night. That was one of my favorite things I've ever heard. But at least we didn't see any huge Biden gaffes for this one.
That is
Um,
true.
yeah, and we certainly saw, I wouldn't call him a gaff because Trump doesn't really make gaffes in these debates. He just misses layups, you know? Uh, the way that Chris Wallace asked him to denounce white supremacy and Trump went, sure, I'll do it. Like, that's not doing it. And Chris Wallace kept asking him, like, do it. And he's like, do what? And then uh, we could say, maybe Trump doesn't understand the English language very much about that stand back and stand by when he meant stand down or something. But that's all neither here nor there. One thing that I found the most disappointing from the debate, and I put a little list of some stuff, and that's involving the media and the debate. But my big thing was there wasn't any talk about the forced sterilizations that are happening in the ICE migrant detention camps, and that to me is one of the biggest scandals I think in American history. You
You
know
could
what I
argue
mean?
it's a Watergate. It's another
Exactly.
it's another Tuskegee syphilis experiment or whatever they called it.
Yeah, and to me, I I just don't understand how that barely made headlines when it came out because there was other stuff that happened that day. I don't even remember. I just remember going, "What the heck is going on?" And I thought for sure there would be a question on it, but maybe I set my standards too high for a Fox News moderator. But
The
that to me is one of the, if not one of the biggest atrocity that the government has committed this century.
you
You
know
know what I mean?
the other thing that makes me sad is that neither party is really even making an effort to care about the underlying what's going on, the actual serious issues. You know what I mean? Because we're having some discussions, but the bigwigs aren't talking about banning no-knock warrants. The bigwigs certainly aren't talking about what causes, for example, interactions like Breonna Taylor's to be all too common. The bigwigs, no one talks about our drone wars. You know what I mean? To that point that you're making. And so it really does seem like uh, this is a little bit cliche, but it almost kind of feels like a really bad play at this point. You know what I mean? This just feels so artificial. I mean, surely like sterilization and worse, without consent and jails or concentration camps or whatever the vernacular is, would surely be alarming to most Americans, or so I would like to think. It's bewildering doesn't even really begin to describe it because bewildering implies that there's like I'm almost not even disappointed when stuff like that gets brushed under the rug, you know?
Oh man, I gotta tell you, as a young person, maybe it's just a benefit of me being young, but I've got more than enough outrage to go around, and I have a seemingly endless supply of outrage to the way things are being handled right now because I just things don't seem to be getting any better on certain aspects, and then on the other hand, things might get better in the future. Who knows? But maybe it's just 2020 dragging me down. But that was just such a big issue for me. I thought certainly with how close that story came out, close to the debates, we saw, but we saw almost no coverage. There was coverage by the media. The Times had a piece on it, all that. But you would think that something like that would make the debate. I wouldn't expect. You mentioned the drone wars. Trump has used drones more than even Obama, which is crazy because he's using them in Somalia, right?
Hmm.
So that to me just doesn't make any sense. There's nothing. It's Somalia. Most Americans wouldn't even know that we were attacking Somalia like with a drone every day almost. But that's just that's something that you would think a debate would want to talk about because it matters. But I don't know if it's because Chris Wallace was the host or if because the media thinks that Americans don't care about it. I mean, it's just clearly that the incentives are not in the right place. Like you said, there's something that is making us focus on the wrong things, and maybe that's just us being incorrect. And some people think that obviously racism should be a forefront, and I'm happy that they asked Trump to denounce white supremacy. But in comparison to some of the other stuff, it just doesn't make sense to me that we're not talking about things that affect people's lives every day, or that you know the forced sterilization. That these are the kind of things that shouldn't happen in a country like America.
Hmm. And really, really, the thing that just doesn't get out of my head when we're talking about this is how it seems to me like in a lot of the areas where we have done better as a society, it's almost never intended that way. You know what I mean? Uh, I think one thing's becoming very clear, and I hope that whatever happens cools down on December 31st at about 11:59 p.m. Because I mean, they literally confirmed UFOs this year. That was literally a thing that happened, and like no one even talked about it. That's how absolutely nuts. Like if someone would have told me on New Year's Eve of 2019 that this is what this year is going to be like, I would really consider getting them to a hospital for being way too messed up because like this is just we're so far outside of the normal. You know what I mean?
Right. No, I totally agree. So, Bradley, let me tee you up here. What was kind of something that stood out to you from the debate? We talked about how there was a lack of substance or anything, but was there anything that you thought was missing from the debate? I mentioned the sterilizations. We talked a bit about the drone programs. I mean, was there anything that you felt like really should have been done better?
Well, gosh, it's tough to even pick one individual thing. I'll say something that really stood out in particular as a low point for American, the American experiment was the heavy, heavy sparring about each other's families. Like, this is getting personal at the very, very highest level, and that typically doesn't play overall. That's very, very alarming to me. Because if that's the way that, you know, the president is talking, and I just don't imagine that that's going to trickle down well, so to speak, on the rest of American society. And the one thing that that really, really surprised me is that I didn't really, I would think that there would be a bigger emphasis on some of the things that, like, I was expecting more of a almost a second referendum on Obama on Biden's part. But I guess that And granted, a lot of this it does have to do with Trump just being an absolute egomaniac, but it kind of felt like we didn't really the Biden presidency feels like a very vague thing to me. You know what I mean? He certainly is not Trump, but I really wonder what actual policy proposals and all that he would put
So,
forward.
so he
Because
did say that he was against the Green New Deal. So there was
yeah,
that policy. He said he was against that, which is, you know, to me as a progressive, that doesn't get me excited to vote for a Democratic candidate that said he would veto Medicare for all and veto the Green New Deal. That's, you know, it's not going to excite your base very well, are you?
yeah, and that was really the only point of differentiation that he made. I felt like I just didn't see any. I would have loved to have seen under the Biden administration, it'll be this, that, and the other thing, and here's how we do it. But maybe I'm just a little too idealistic. Although I do think that insofar as he did talk smack about the Green New Deal, that was a pretty good idea on his part because I think the Green New Deal really I think that poisons the well for the Democrats going into 2024, depending on how the coronavirus and everything shakes out. I really think it does.
I don't know how it'll affect 2024 because I don't know what's going to happen a month from now. So I'm gonna take it one day at a time because the electorate has been changing so dramatically. We could see it play out very differently in 2024. I mean, we could be talking about if Biden wins Texas this year in 2020, and as the cities in Texas get more and more liberal, and you see more and more liberal people kind of moving to Texas, you could be seeing that become more in play, and we'll see a very different electorate in that time. So I think it's much too far for us to know what the parties will look like in 2024, honestly.
That is fair. I'm I gotta say, I'm just really. It feels like this year is so aimless, and the thing that makes me very nervous about it is, I mean, obviously the coronavirus is going to be with us for quite some time. The economic whatever wherewithal is going to be with us. I have a feeling that these protests about police brutality are not going to go away anytime soon.
Well,
But
I certainly hope the protests don't, because until police violence starts to go away, then these protests should not go away.
I agree with you 100%. But man, what I'm terrified about is if a week or two after the election things don't shake out, uh, then it's literally anybody's guess. And granted, I imagine that would eventually get kicked to the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court has been overruled before, so
Yeah.
it'll be a very. I'm I would say that I'm looking forward to the election just to get. That's usually my stance on stuff like this. Just get the stupid campaign commercials off my TV. But man, we are really truly approaching an unknown area, and my God, it kind of reminds me of World War One. There's an anecdote where they captured a German high-ranking officer, and they're like, "Hey, why did this war start?" And he's like, "Well, I have no idea. I was going to ask you the same thing." So it really feels like we've kind of backed our way into this. I, it's not. It's no longer a crisis. It's no longer a crisis, is what it's turned into. It's evolved into something more. You know what I mean? It's like a self-sacking of the American empire.
I completely agree. However, I would like us to do a whole podcast episode on that. So, based on that, I think this would be a good time for a break. And then when we come back, I really want us to talk about the media coverage of the debate, because I'm an avid media watcher. I don't know if you are, but I've got some takeaways about what the media did or didn't cover, and kind of what I took away from that.
Right on. So with that, we will be back in a few, folks. Here you go. Now.
Hey everyone, this is AJ and welcome back to the Horseshoe Theory. So we segued into that break talking about now we're gonna cover the media coverage. We're recording this on Thursday, October 1st. So it's been a full day of media coverage, and everyone had their takes right away, right after the debate. So now I wanted us to discuss what the media covered and what kind of flaws there are in the coverage because sorry to say this, y'all, but at the end of the day, more people pay attention to the media coverage of the debate than that actually watch the debate. Now, I know that Trump recently tweeted about this being the highest rated debate of all time or whatever, but that still doesn't really have the reach that all of the news organizations have covering it. So if we're going to talk about the debate, we also have to talk about what the media covered. And one thing that I consider myself a pretty avid consumer of media. By avid, I mean I get all of my news from different sources. I have an app on my phone specifically made for me to look at headlines from all different sources of different leans. It tells me what their media bias is, what kind of time they created it, all of that stuff. If y'all are interested in the app, it's called Ground News. But so they released a report, analyzing any sort of blind spots, and even this app missed this blind spot. And something that I was really frustrated by was during the event when they were talking about a peaceful transition of power, Trump essentially tried to set a precedent. He tried to say that there was never a peaceful transfer for him from Obama to him. This continues with his normal narrative of the deep state is out to get him, whatever the deep state is. But the wording that concerned me and that I don't think was covered really at all by any sort of media types was that Trump accused Hillary Clinton of attempting to stage a coup. And to me, that's some third world dictator authoritarian stuff. We're talking about, and I know that I'm going to make it sound overblown because it's just Trump speaking out of his butt, whatever you want to say. But at the end of the day, he holds the office of the presidency, and we need to take what he says seriously. And the sitting president of the United States of America accused a political opponent who wasn't in office when she lost of staging a coup against his administration. I mean, in any other administration, in any other debate, that would be front headline, right and center. You know what I mean? And what happened is it's not even covered. It's not even a byline. I read a couple analyses. I listened to some podcasts. No one mentioned it. And that just goes to show how really far the normal has gone. And to me, that was really the moment that I've kind of lost faith in our institutions right now is, and I knew it when he said that. I said, this will get absolutely no media coverage, that, the office of the presidency, he is accusing political opponents of staging a coup, which, by the way, I don't think Trump knows what coup means because his government actually tried to stage a coup in Venezuela.
So I don't think he knows how to spell it.
Exactly, right? And to me, it doesn't even it really kind of made a mockery of the American form of government, where and especially the office of the presidency, where he got to say, I won this election, but the person that I beat, who wasn't in office, tried to stage a coup, which is just so far-fetched, and the lack of coverage, I mean, it just goes, in my opinion, I think it's one of the worst things to come out of that debate, if not right up there with not even asking questions about the biggest government atrocity this century of forced sterilizations of detained migrants. Just to me, those two things, I'm glad I was drinking.
That should be the byline for all of 2020. One thing that I will say I'm happy that the media has been consistent on is at least they're silent about the threatening of a political rival with a coup. as they were about acquiescing to the executive's ability to just kind of determine anyone, including American citizens, of being terrorists and holding them without trial. So, what what's really worrying to me, and like you said, the fact that they didn't. I mean, it's just insane that they didn't cover it. But I I almost wonder if that just slipped aside because everything's so chaotic, or if there's a because I would be a lot less scared if Trump accused uh if this happened, if this were like the 70s. You know what I mean? I would feel a lot better about it if we were in the pre-Patriot Act days. But as far as the media, scares the thing that kind of lit me off to a certain extent was that I felt like the Proud Boys thing, even though it got some coverage, was way, way, way underplayed. I mean, this is a guy calling out. I mean, he had such an easy opportunity to call out the craphead people that make up some of these organizations, right? You called it a layup earlier. It's like an extra point to win the game from 5 yards out. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
literally, I think
Absolutely.
a middle schooler could have answered that question. And the way that he did it, like you said, he could interpret it as he's bad at English, but that's some very brown shirt rhetoric right there.
I completely agree. I don't. So it's kind of interesting because on the one hand, it's gotten some coverage. On the other hand, it hasn't. And I just think that's because so much craziness happened in that debate. And I understand that they have to cover things because it wasn't, when the debate ended, I was watching the ABC News stream, and George Stephanopoulos did not hesitate to call it the worst debate he's ever seen. Dana Bash immediately after, if you were watching it on CNN, and I'm sorry, Duke, but I'm just saying what Dana Bash said. She called it a shit show on their live show, and to me, that to me just kind of the coverage has to surround, well, what exactly happened? Nothing happened, but at the same time, a lot of crazy rhetoric happened, and as you and I both know, the American populace only has so much bandwidth. So that's why when Trump accused Hillary Clinton of staging a coup, I absolutely knew it wasn't going to be talked about because it would talk about other things. But in response to your pointing out the white supremacy thing, that's actually kind of created some blowback. On yesterday, so for us yesterday, or on Wednesday, so the day after the debate, even Fox News was like, "How did Trump mess this up?" You know what I mean? And that's kind of crazy. Like Brian Kilmeade on Fox and Friends, which for some reason people watch, but he said, Trump messed this up. John Roberts and other Fox reporters, he tried to question the president, and he went on Fox News and said he was frustrated that he can't seem to get straight answers. And I mean, obviously, we all know why he can't get straight answers, because Trump's trying to get his base out there.
Mm-hmm.
But it does kind of show. It does show really how far we've gone, that even something like that, we don't think it's getting enough coverage. But that's just because people are sick and tired of this election, man. People campaigned for this election. They started like 16 months ago.
Really, I maintain that it started the day that Trump took office. Especially in the way that it went down with Hillary losing the popular vote, and I think that that's the only thing and I think it's been essential. Like, I feel like the media is complicit in anything that we can talk about, because at the end of the day, they kind of all collectively they like specialized in who they went after, and then they almost stopped caring about objective reality to a certain extent.
I
But
completely agree. I do think certain sectors of the media have really moved away from objective reality and focusing on rhetoric. But rhetoric is important. So,
absolutely.
but I've been talking about this with a lot of more centrist friends. But there's a whole different reality that exists out there, right?
Hmm.
And you and I have talked about this. We can't agree on objective facts. And that's just something that has become more and more polarizing, just basic facts in the days of social media. So it is interesting to see the old school media kind of falter and the new school media come up and look at the way it's kind of shaped our elections and it's shaped the way our people treat each other. Very different.
Which is just absolutely. I feel like what's unique about this period of American history is that everyone agrees that like things are broken, right? If you talk, everyone from the most diehard Trump supporter to your run of the mill centrist to like hardcore progressives, libertarians, whatever ism you believe in, you probably think that things are pretty out of whack right now. But what I wish that we could kind of mature to as a nation, and I don't know if we're going to get there, right? I really, really think that things are going to have to get worse before they get better. But I would love it if someday I could wake up and we could go from, okay, things are broken into what do we do about it? Because it kind of feels like we're going the underpants gnome route on this, where the reporting is that things are broken, question mark, question mark, question mark, outrage. There's no there's no real mechanism of action behind anything, you know? It just feels like we're so stuck and everyone's contributing to it, including the media in a huge way, but no one's really conscious of the fact that they're contributing to it.
Yeah, I've got a couple different takes on that, and I agree with most of what you say. Almost 100%. I would like to add some clarifications, but that's another topic that's really deep, and we could do a whole podcast talking about that, man. So the next, is there anything about the media coverage? You mentioned the white supremacy thing. So I'm going to go ahead and lead off with my next thing that kind of the media coverage frustrated me about. And that was a lot of discussions happened with people saying, well, it was the format of the debate that led to that kind of mayhem, right? The, I think almost everyone that I saw in the media, everyone that I saw or that I talked to, everyone was like, yeah, they just need a mute button to solve this debate issue, right? I don't know if you've heard about that, right?
Mm-hmm. I have.
So that to me avoids the actual cause of what happened, of what created a debate that way. Because one, a mute button would never be added to the debate. There's no way the Trump campaign would agree to that. So then you have to look at, well, why won't the Trump campaign agree to that? Well, it's because the issue with this debate is the candidate himself, Donald J. Trump, right? The problem wasn't the format, and there was a lot of people picking on Chris Wallace, and he had probably the worst job in the world for that night. But, you know, at the end of the day, saying it's that stuff is avoiding the issue. The issue is that a debate didn't look presidential because one of the candidates is not presidential. I just felt like everyone's kind of beating around the bush and trying to say, you know, we haven't gotten that far. But the issue is, and I always try to say the president of the United States to really show the gravity of it, but like the president of the United States demonstrated during that debate that he's not presidential. And if you're still voting for him because he isn't presidential, well, go for it. But if you're frustrated at the way that debate went and you still vote for him, that's on you. You're the one that's okay with politics becoming that way.
The other thing and I think that's part of the weird, because Trump, the only way that he was able to win is he taps into a very particular type of largely white, rural, to a certain extent, like former industrial. Trump won essentially by flipping the unions, right? If he doesn't have that performance in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, there is no Trump. Uh, but the thing that's terrifying to me is that I think not only are you right about that, but I think that the segment of the population that likes that is like that just reinforces it for them, you know? And I think that we're starting to see it in certain, you see it pop up occasionally in things like the Daily Mail, or I don't even know if Breitbart is even being published anymore. I try not to kill brain cells that quickly. Uh, but things like Breitbart, I mean, my God, if you read into some of this, there's a lot of media that's actively cheering it on, you know? They think that Trump is giving the finger to some mythical boogeyman. I think that's a really big I I really do truly believe, and this is the other thing that's kind of got me irritated about the debate, is that so many of these articles that I mean, yeah, the center right and center left are like, oh, awful. But so many of the articles that a lot of people spend a lot of time reading, right? Already knew it exactly what they were going to say. They just had to change. They just had to change the skin of it, so to speak, you know. And to me, I think that that's a really I think that it's telling. I think that it's very telling because I what I've come to the conclusion on is not only it's to a certain extent the media is just kind of following up with what's there. I'm almost wondering if the media isn't just doing what the political parties had to do to a certain extent and kind of acquiesce and kind of give in to the more radical influences. Because I think you hit on something there. That was the least presidential thing I've ever seen. Okay, and I grew up during the second Bush. It hasn't always been great, but I think that that was the reddest meat that he could have thrown out there, and that's pretty terrifying. It's a pretty terrifying state.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of denigrating the office, like I said, the sitting president of the United States, you got. I always want to say it that way to have that gravity, but the sitting president of the United States was attacking his opponent's son's drug addiction
Right?
on the debate stage, and this is in a country that's being torn apart by an opioid crisis. And I mean, I think I think Biden clearly rehearsed it because it was. I'm so happy that his campaign prepared him for that because he handled it very well. And he said, I'm
He
proud of
did.
my son for overcoming it and all that. But I mean, like I said, put yourself in Biden's shoes. It's no wonder that he probably rehearsed the line "clown." You're right on that. But I mean, what else do you kind of say to a man that's attacking you like that?
I hear you. It really, if I can kind of sum it up, when I was watching Trump, it felt like I was watching. It almost feels like a certain portion of the electorate like wants their mechanic to be president. You know what I mean? That's the that was the and really there's been a lot of focus. The one thing that I have liked on the media is that there has been a lot of focus on norms being broken. But I think what's even more interesting is that same media. I really think that in the I want to say the larger picture, but in how the media is kind of like you said, there's no coverage of the sterilization. Absolutely not a single word, right? Like like
Not a big word, right?
no, no.
You would think it would make bigger waves, but it ended up not.
It made about the same amount of impact in my opinion as like a B-list movie star dying. Like it was just like it was almost in the damn classifieds, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
Uh, but I think that we've gotten to a position where the media is. I almost wonder if there's not some type of conscience forming. You know what I mean? Because I think that even if you are foxed up, like really foxed up, I I truly question if does Murdoch still own Fox News? Is that his side project?
So it's still family owned, but he stepped down from the executive board, if I remember correctly.
All right, so a Murdoch, but you almost have to wonder at what point you kind of the chips get thrown on the table. And which is all a roundabout way of saying that I I think what we're seeing is that there has been degradation for generations now on the on the executive branch, and I feel like the media and to a certain and definitely the parties as well is kind of slowly waking up to that realization, you know, because they've definitely not intentionally, but the media that we've seen today is, you know, very complicit in even allowing the whatever you want to call it, the historical anomaly, the dictator wannabe. I call him Mussolini with smaller hands to my friends, but
Oh, I got a nickname for you. You might like Mango Mussolini. Got that
Mango
one.
Musi.
Yeah, thought you might like that.
I like that. It's got the alliteration.
Yeah, exactly.
This is this is just a horrible mutation of something that, to a certain extent, they allowed to begin with. You know.
I completely agree. Trump is a symptom, not a cause, and I
Yeah.
and I think that people that think Trump is a cause, they need to wake up with getting. If you're the type of person that wants Trump out of office, which based on the debate, I think that's a very reasonable expectation. Um, Getting Trump out is not going to fix everything, unfortunately.
hmm Uh, I saw a meme that said that to a certain extent, and especially to a certain extent, if you think that voting Biden is going to just magically make it all better, you're not actually interested in much change. You just want to feel better about your life while you eat at brunch.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. One thing I wanted to say is, in terms of the presidentialness of the debate, I saw a video where they took the audio of the debate where Trump and Chris Wallace and Biden were all arguing, and they just put like a Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 lobby, like on there, and it just seemed exactly like I don't know if y'all remember this or if you played much video games, but back in the day before you could form parties with your friends, the lobbies of different games were just absolute cancer. It was just everybody insulting each other. So if those logs ever show up, you're going to ruin people's careers for the stuff that they said. And especially like, little kids just saying absolutely horrendous things in high voices. But you put like a certain clip from the debate where they just were all arguing at the same time and just had a Call of Duty screen on it. It completely made sense if you were in those lobbies. You were like, yeah, that sounds about right. This is straight up a Call of Duty lobby. That's what our presidential debate has turned into.
Mm-hmm. Election Call of Duty 2020, Call of Duty Election 2020 edition.
Yeah.
You know, depending on how it plays out after the election, it might get a little more literal there. God, I hope not.
I really hope not, but yeah. Uh, all right. So last thing that I've got on the media, I don't know if you have one more, but I know we're running short on time. Last thing that I want to talk about is the media, and this is where you mentioned that the media is complicit in this kind of rise in the power of the authoritarian. But that's because, in my opinion, the media has tried really hard to focus on not being biased. And in their opinion, the best way of seeing non-bias is to change what the reality is and say both sides are doing this. I mean, I saw a New York Times article that said that, of the American populace was shocked that this heated campaign went to full of both candidates just turned to interruptions and name calling. And while that may have an element of truth to it, it's a huge false equivalence to say that it was Biden doing the interruptions or Biden was the one that denigrated the debate. I mean, objectively, and they had it later in the article, but I mean, just if you take that part of the article, like that's not doing justice. Trump interrupted, they said 741 times or something. I mean, to both sides, something like that is just a criminal, and it allows and if you're the uninformed viewer, you only see clips or whatever, then you're going to read that sentence potentially because you probably don't read the whole article because if you're an uninformed one, you're just looking for headlines. But that kind of both sidesing of it is not doing justice to the reality. And you mentioned the media is complicit in this, but it really is because that kind of makes it seem like this is normal, right? And they're allowing that kind of stuff to be treated as normal. Them not covering the Trump accusing a political opponent of staging a coup as normal. During the debate, Chris Wallace tried to set up a what in my opinion is a false equivalence. He tried to set up an equivalence between, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, saying that they want independent observers to certify the election before they, admit defeat in that case. To Trump saying that he won't recognize it unless he wins or the ballots that he wants counted are counted. You know what I mean? I just don't see them as equivalents, especially when you consider that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are not president and vice president.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right that they're definitely bending truth, and they've bent it very, very liberally. And I do think that there is because like I said, I'm not one of those people that thinks that the media is just like a Dr. Evil-esque collection of people meeting in the middle of Seattle in a giant Starbucks building. I'm not into that form. I really do think that it was just a series of very honest mistakes, if you will, with a little bit of graft here and there. But and the other thing too is that I feel like you mentioned that they kind of both sides it a lot. I think that that's just a consequence of the type of policy that's grown out over the last 20 years. Because for all of the lines in the sand and all the fierce debates, Bush, in hindsight, doesn't appear that much different from Obama. You know, so I feel like we're trying to both sides it in terms of the media, but they're not doing it on the things that are actually even, where both parties are actually complicit in something.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, and they're trying to kind of stoke up those identity issues that people get riled up about. But there's a saying. It's like in America, there's really only one party, right? And that's the corporate party, the
Hmm.
corporate big government party.
Yep, Boeing will always eat first, and they will always eat the most.
Yeah, but you know, it, it's hard to come up with an answer to that in terms of whether the media did it as honest mistakes. I don't know if I would say that it's because of honest mistakes. I do think that the incentives of especially modern day news media are not are not set up to where reality or especially critical thinking is not really emphasized with the media as it currently stands. And frankly, in America, critical thinking isn't really used that often. People don't question the sources. People don't question what they're reading. People don't question, oh, why is the head of the police officers union saying that nothing was done wrong? Why would he do that? They just take his word at face value if there's nothing to contradict that, which is, how often do people lie? Right?
Hmm. I tell you what, we are. Sometimes it feels like we are just a nation of used car salesmen and suckers buying lemons. Feels like that's what we've fallen into.
I definitely feel like I've bought a lemon more than once or twice this year. Got to tell you, if what day are we on? There's been 200 something lemons.
Yeah, it has been, and we're not even all the way through it yet. May Lord have mercy on us all.
It's
But
it's, it's only going to get worse, man. We got 30 more days of this election.
oh boy. But I'll circle up on this, and then unless you've got anything to talk about, I think we're button up on the good people are finished with their morning commute by this point. But so the one thing that I really want to talk about is you mentioned that we don't have a lot of critical thinking anymore in this country. And I just want to posit, we don't have to send it into another full discussion, but it certainly feels like we've been living in a society that doesn't encourage any type of critical thinking. You know what I mean? Everything is either pre-planned for you. Uh, there's uh, there's not a lot of actual thinking through choice that the average individual does anymore. And and granted, I'm sure people make very personal decisions in their own lives, but there's just so much of this, like we've said many times, a lot of the people before the first words were even uttered in the debate knew who was going to win in their own minds. And I think it's very telling of the American system that we've gotten from a point where, the Senate in the Federalist Papers was called, what was it? It was called the greatest assembly on earth or something, is supposed to be the super rational upper house. That's
I,
not,
be- I believe it was called the greatest deliberative body in the history of the world or something.
yeah, exactly. And boy, it's interesting to see how that the populace that was designed for has denigrated so quickly into just a bunch of jerks with loudspeakers.
Yeah, I remember that quote because people talked about it like this is the greatest deliberative body in the world when Ted Cruz read Green Eggs and Ham on the Senate floor.
What a country. That doesn't even seem that crazy anymore. I would actually kind of like if I woke up and saw that on the news. That might settle my mind.
Yeah, let's go back to those days. What was that, 2015, 20 or something? It was first term Senator Cruz, so it might have been 2012 or 2013. Those were
Yes.
the
Man, I tell you what, he is. I don't know if he is the Zodiac killer, but has anyone ever identified where it was on those nights?
my my issue with Ted Cruz is that he wears two watches, and he wears a watch on each wrist, and to me, that is the surest sign of a serial killer I've ever seen. Doesn't matter if he's the Zodiac killer or not, but if you're wearing two watches, man, why do you need two?
if that if that were me doing it on the street, I'd get pulled over and searched, man.
Right. What's the other time zone that you got to keep track of, man?
Are there any extra loud ticking noises near him? Grab his bag. Grab his bag.
Oh man, you're saying that as a white man. Now imagine me as an Arab. Oh God. I wouldn't be able to fly on a plane with a watch on each wrist if I was wearing like a short sleeve shirt or something. That'd be hilarious.
That would make for an interesting live stream. So, anyhow, folks, I think that we'd better end it before we get AJ bumped to the yellow list or whatever the hell they call it. He has to go through extra precautions next time he goes through the flight. So, in order to protect my co-host from the overreaching arm of the government, I think we'll sign off here. And boy, this is one of those situations where I don't know if I think we're certainly much too young, and certainly, I don't know if anyone has the answers to some of this stuff, right? It's going to take a long period of reflection, but hey, folks, I'm sure it'll probably get worse soon, so enjoy it while you can, I guess.
But that's why we started this podcast. We want people to return to critical thinking and having discussions. And Bradley and I really disagree on a lot, but we agree on reality, and we agree on basic morals. And the show is called Horseshoe Theory, right? At some point, everything bends around, and we're all human, and we got to remember that at the end of the day. So with that, I think that's the final words. This has been Horseshoe Theory. I'm AJ.
And I am Bradley. Have a good one,
Take care,
folks.
folks.